You're listening to Let's Get Metaphysical. This podcast explores the spiritual and metaphysical world through the experiences and opinions of the host and those interviewed. It should not necessarily be seen as direct endorsement or personal advice to our listeners. We encourage you to use your own discernment, judgment, and intuition regarding anything you learn of through this show.
Let's get metaphysical.
Welcome to Let's Get Metaphysical. I'm your host, Renata Maniaci. Here to remind you that you are a spiritual being having a human experience here on lovely planet Earth. I've been told that I like to focus on the light more than the dark. Love and light, love and light, love and light. I must confess that I do prefer to send my attentions more to the light and to love and to high vibrations. But that doesn't mean that I do not understand the importance of the dark and the shadow. And in today's episode, we are going to dive deep into the shadow and the dark and external pernicious influences and see what that means for us and how that goes and combines with the light. To help me with this conversation, I have invited my dear friend and mentor, Jerry Becker. Jerry is a Healing Touch certified practitioner and instructor, as well as a certified Ayurvedic educator. He was the energy therapy director at Kanyakumari Ayurveda and Yoga Wellness Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for 12 years, where he instructed courses on Ayurvedic energy healing, pranic healing, chakra exploration, as well as subtle bodies and astral anatomy. Jerry has been practicing energetic healing arts since 1990 with Qigong healing methods in relation to his martial arts training that started in 1981. He teaches Tai Chi for health and relaxation, Qigong for health and vitality, and push hands for energetic balance, expansion, and enhancement. Using Ayurvedic principles, Jerry empowers clients to learn about themselves and helps them understand their unique place in the universe. He tailors diet, lifestyle, self-care techniques, meditation, energy therapy, and exercise to each client to achieve a balanced and healthy life. Jerry's intention is for you to be well. Jerry also has had his fair share of experience with the dark, the shadow, or what he will call external pernicious influences. I think he is the perfect person to talk to about this topic, and I am excited to have this conversation. Let's get right into it. Greetings, metaphysicians. Welcome, Jerry. I am so happy that you are here today. I've been wanting to have you on the podcast for a year now. How are you?
I'm excellent, and I've been a patron for a year now, and
Yay!
I really look forward to your broadcasts.
Oh, thank you. So, Jerry, just for the audience, I call Jerry Bear, so that might come out a few times. Bear, as you know, the first thing that I like to ask my guests on this podcast is if they would share a metaphysical experience with our listeners. And with you, you're a wizard. Your whole life is what normal people would call is in the realm of metaphysics and spirituality. So I was just curious if you would share a Muggle experience with us today to start out this episode.
I do have an interesting Muggle experience. When my daughter was 11, she came to me and said, "Dad, not all of my friends can talk to trees." And I was like, oh, right. We have to be a little bit careful how we relate to that. So just be wise in how you tell your friends you talk to trees. Because in our family, that was kind of normal. We would go and talk to them and see what they had to say and check in. So that seemed normal to me. And I was like, oh, I forgot to tell you that.
I love that. That's awesome. I've been wanting to talk about this topic for a while, and I think that you're the perfect person to talk to. I've been really interested in having an episode or episodes around talking about the more shadowy side or the more dark side of metaphysics and what can come out of magic and spirituality. And what we've talked about, one of the terms that you brought forward to me is external pernicious influences. And I love that way of thinking about it. So let's just get started into that. I was wondering if you could share any of your experience with this aspect of spirituality or metaphysics.
I find external pernicious influences is a good term to use to disempower and actually make you consider and think of what's actually influencing you. So I break external pernicious influences down into various categories, from nuisances, which are just energies that are hanging around that aren't good for you, that are not beneficial, all the way to quick call the Pope, because this is really, really difficult to handle and you really need a professional to do it. And oftentimes we have various Klingons who just kind of latch onto you. You've picked them up when you're in a low frequency vibration, or if you're unconscious or you do drugs and you lose that connection to, I guess you'd say, the light or to life for a brief time, and then something will drop in and say, oh, here's a nice home for me. I have an opening. And oftentimes they will invite their friends and they begin to pull on your energy. They begin to cause you issues. They begin to influence your behavior and how you react. And it can actually be very debilitating. And some are very nasty in that they will debilitate a person until there's really no energy left. And then they'll jump to the next person who has an opening. So those are the ones that I really particularly dislike, because they're active, they know what they're doing, they're nasty, and they want your energy and they will take it.
So just for the listeners in the audience that might, just to be a little bit more clear, we're talking about things that other people, other folks might call different names, right? Like some people might call these influences demons or maybe ghosts or poltergeists. Have you heard any term that people might refer to these things as? So they might be thinking, oh, this is how I think of it. I don't think of it as like an external pernicious influence, so that people know what we're talking about.
Yes, so the term demon will come to mind, and that's one where if you have a particularly nasty one, it's called the Pope. But there's various minor ones, and there's two technical categories. One is they are from the spirit realm and will influence you, and the other one is they're from extraplanetary realms and dimensions, and they're here as tourists. They're here to just see what's going on. They're here to have an experience, and if you give them enough energy and the experience is wonderful for them, then they're going to call their friends, and then they're all going to move in.
Right.
So you become tourist central. So those are the ones that I consider just kind of passing, that you can get rid of relatively easily. And the ones who really dig in, the ones who are of a darker nature, those are the ones who come from the metaphysical realms and are considered part of the dark, if you want to put it that way. But if you identify them and if you look at them as, if just as you have beings of light, you have beings of dark, there's a balance that can be had that you can work with so that you stay in balance and you choose what you want to do. And most people don't choose to play with the dark because it doesn't enlighten you, it doesn't enliven you, it doesn't cause you to be vital. You're actually a conduit of part of their food chain, feeding them your energy. So the tourist ones who come in from other realms are the ones that they're looking for a good time. So if you've been out having a good time and you lost consciousness, chances are you're going to pick up one of those. And it can be similar to hearing voices. It can be similar to having cravings you've never had before, until your energy levels get to a point where they can move into your body and being more of a full time. So those are the ones we identify in different ways.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for being so clear about that. I think it's a very easy way to follow the way that you talk about this, which is another reason why I'm excited to have this conversation with you today. Would you mind sharing any of your personal experience with what we would call external pernicious influences, and maybe some of how that came into your life And maybe when it came into your life?
I will share with you my one where I got the most understanding was because I had one. I had one who would be in the demon quality.
The call the Pope quality?
Yeah, almost. It's probably one step down from a call the Pope, but definitely causing enough issues, causing health problems, causing weaknesses, causing issues in relationships and consciousness that I was tired of it. And I was like, how do I get rid of this? What do I do? So after reading various things from various metaphysical aspects, it came down to, what do I do about it? How can I rid myself of this thing? And it took me at least a year of deep internal prospecting to find out where it was inhabiting my body, and work out its tendrils from my energy system until I could finally get a handle on the whole thing. And it was a lot of Epsom salt baths with candle breathing just to purify me, a lot of breathing in as much light as I possibly could until I could finally get a handle, identify, and see what I was actually dealing with. And it was not nice, and it wasn't fun, and it was very painful physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, until I got to the point where I realized that if it could chew on me, if it could use my energy, then it was in my realm. And if it was in my realm, I could chew on its energy. And I got really pissed one day. And I said, I had enough of this working. I'd make advances. I would feel good for a while because mainly it would hide. And then it would be like, there it is again. So I was really perturbed with it one day and finally decided that, look, if it can chew on me, I can chew on it. So I did. And I ate it. And it tasted bad, but it was a rush of the energy, but it wasn't the type of energy that you would find beneficial or helpful. However, I ate it, it was gone, and it was a very wonderful feeling to be able to fill wholly with light without having any holes in my system, any leaks, or any issues. And at that point in time, it was rebuilt into a position where I didn't have to deal with that anymore. At the same time, because I had spent so much time identifying it within all realms of my being, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and all aspects, they became much more easily for me to identify in other people. So it was easier for me to see them in clients. It was easier to see their influences and what was going on, and how to develop methods to dealing with that type of situation.
Okay, great. Is your experience that it was something outside of you that came in and influenced you because of some, a weak spot in your field or in your psyche? Or do you find that it was an aspect of you, maybe like a shadow aspect of you that you needed to transform? How do you conceptualize that?
That's a really good question. And I think people should really analyze within themselves what's happening in their relationship to shadow and light. In my particular case, it was an outside influence, and hence I use the term external pernicious influences. It was from outside, and when you really consider it, it was my energy system. And my energy system runs in balance. Light, shade, dark, it's all there, and all needs to be balanced and addressed. So you really need to get a handle on how you deal with shadow. And my main concern with shadow with people is if they go into shadow looking for a fight, they're going to find one and lose. If you go into shadow to understand your power, where you are in the universe and how you fit in, if you go into shadow looking for information and looking for how you align, you will find vast quantities of energy, of understanding, and the ability to expand your consciousness. Where if you only go to the light, then anything of shadow will concern you. If you come into balance and you understand your own balance of shadow and light, you will find it a strength. You'll find you can use these types of energies, but you have to use them in a heart-centered, loving way. You can't just be me, me, me. It has to be, how can we do more? How can I harness this? How can I use this energy to do better? And it gives you a greater scope. It gives you a much larger range in the metaphysical realm of understanding, of working with different levels and realms of beings. It allows you to communicate more clearly, because they don't consider themselves all light or all dark. They consider themselves as beings, and they're there. So if you're hiding from certain aspects of yourself, you're only using half of your ability and half of your powers.
I agree with that. I feel the same way about using your divine masculine and using your divine feminine.
It's a perfect example of balancing. And neither one can exist without the other. And together they can create things that nothing else can even rival. So that's a perfect example. And I'm using light and shade or shadow, and it's almost the same similarities.
Right. And actually, zooming out and looking at that more for myself, it's easy to look at our society and look at a human and be like, that person is very much in their masculine and that person's very much in their feminine. And metaphysically, we could probably also say the same thing. That person is very much in the light or that person is very much in the shadow. When, instead of looking out, I think for so long, especially where masculinity and femininity is concerned, people have been looking outside of themselves to balance, whether in a partner or whoever they're hanging out with. And I'm curious, actually, that might be happening in the metaphysical realm as well. If you're full of light, maybe you're consciously or subconsciously looking for that balance, maybe externally, but what we're talking about is balancing that within yourself. That's a really interesting topic in itself.
Happy to help.
Thank you. So, having had the experience that you've had, and now working with clients, and you mentioned being able to see external pernicious influences, or EPIs as I like to call them, more easily in folks, are there certain markers about a person's life that make it maybe easier for EPIs to come into their life? What would you say about that?
Well, I find that people who are predominantly empathic or highly sensitive have a resonance with them. And if you're empathic or sensitive and you decide to dull your skills and abilities by using drugs or alcohol to kind of take the edge off so that you're not as sensitive, that you're creating more openings for this type of darker shadow aspect to come into your system. So you're talking about people who are vibrating at a high enough level to meld their fields with others to gain information. When they're doing that unconsciously and they don't know why or how, they don't have the boundaries or the protections to keep themselves intact, that blending allows openings to occur, as well as if they're in a lower vibrational aspect, undergo surgeries and are unconscious, get into car accidents, are unconscious, things like that, or dull themselves with drugs or alcohol. They end up with holes in their system that are exploitable. And so anyone can have them, but I find that the ones who are sensitive are particularly drawn to that.
Why do you think, I just kind of want to just lay it out here, like, why do you think drugs and alcohol create holes in the field? What is it about them that do that?
So from my perspective, it's depending on the drugs and alcohol, of course, it creates a lower vibrational aspect in their being. It creates a disconnect from their consciousness, and in that moment of disconnection is when other things can reconnect and come in and start influencing. And that's when you're also drawn, once you have them, you're drawn into creating that behavior more so that they can bring more of their friends in, you can be more influenced. And it can spiral to the point where people are totally debilitated. Then the aspects of shadow that are chewing on them and eating them are like, oh, I'm done with this vehicle. I'm looking for a new one. So now you're in a hospital because the person's debilitated, and the next person nearby or in a different room or as you're going through the hospital has a little bit more energy and has openings. So then they'll hop and move. Now that's not all of them, but there are hoppers and movers, and they act like chameleons. They hide. They don't want to be found. And because obviously you have energy and they want it. So you have to be aware of what situation you're in. And if you're in low vibration situations, you want to be as vibrant as possible and whole as in a metaphysical, complete imbalance if possible.
Right. That makes a lot of sense to me. Can we talk a little bit more about different types of shadow, different types of external pernicious influences? What's kind of the range that you have seen within yourself or within clients? And, what requires, we're going to get into this a bit more in the next episode about protections and boundaries, but just for kind of starting to get into this topic a little bit, what's kind of the range that you've seen, and what might require like more efforts to try to remove a thing or shift a thing, and what might require, a little bit of effort and, maybe not so difficult to shift?
Mm-hmm. So the predominant ones I see are relatively low level. I think you would call them imps if you really wanted to put them that way. Energies of opportunity. And they'll look for any holes or cracks. And it's like, if you're a bright, shining person and you just popped open and you're spreading your light all through the universe and have no control over your internal aspects and your frequencies and vibrations, they're like, lunch. Oh, free lunch. Look, I'm going to go get a free lunch. So off they go to hop onto you. So they're pretty smart. Well, some of them are. Some of them are really stupid. But there are some smart ones who, when you go to see your metaphysician and someone who can actually influence them and remove them from your field, they'll hop off. They'll wait for you to come out the door. So it's kind of funny. I've seen various healing places where, they're very effective while you're in there. But when you walk out, they just hop right back on. And it's like, oh, wait, let's not give them a place to hang out.
Right.
So when you're setting the boundaries for your practice, also take into account that you don't want a holding area for things to just hop off, wait for the next client, and then hop back on. You want to make sure that you're fully protected in all aspects.
Right.
So you have the imps who just kind of hop on, and then there's Klingons. Klingons, think of it as just something that just gloms onto you. And it's a low-level sludge. It kind of keeps your consciousness down. You're like, why are my thoughts so slow? What's going on? And those just kind of clog things up, and they just kind of spread and move about. But they're relatively easy to get rid of just by cleansing, by keeping yourself at a high vibrational rate, and you easily to get rid of yourself. And then you move up to the tourists, and those are kind of multi-dimensional beings who are here to use your body to have some fun. And so they'll influence you so that they can have as much fun as possible with your body and your energy and all of your being. And you're the accidental tourist, or you're the vehicle for them. So they will use your vehicle until it doesn't work any longer. Then it's time for them to either go back home, which they're like, wait, I love this free lunch. Oh, this is a buffet. I enjoy it here. They'll move on to the next person and the next person and the next person until they're satisfied with their vacation.
Right.
And they'll be happy to stay here as long as they're allowed. So those are kind of really nuisances, and you really don't want to have them around, and you want to get rid of them as soon as possible. And put up this is not the Airbnb for you. Go elsewhere, find another dimension. And then you move into the ones who are actually nasty and mean it and know it. And they're smart, they're intelligent, they're after your energy, they want you. They want
you specifically?
Your power.
As a being, yeah.
Yeah, they want you, they want your power, they want as much of it as they can get. And those are not nice. Those are really quick, they're very fast, they really drain your energy quickly, and then they're out looking for the next vehicle, a body to inhabit. Those are the ones that take a lot of effort because they debilitate the energetic system in multiple states. And you can have multiple EPIs in your system. Usually the small ones will eventually allow holes for bigger ones until you finally have one that kind of takes over the rest of it. And so you want to get rid of all of it if possible at the same time. And it used to be that I would just simply pull them out of my clients, which was very traumatic, both for me and for them. There are better, easier ways to allow for clean transitions, mainly by starving them. If you don't give them energy, if you cut them off from their food supply, they will want to leave. And I will actually work with higher powers and super friends to create a situation where they can leave safely, but they're not coming back here. They're not going to be on this plane any longer. And if they don't want to go, it's like, fine, you're not going to eat anything. You'll eventually waste away. Too bad for you. That's not my problem. The client really needs to know nothing about it. Just simply wrap them up and wrap up the entities. But oftentimes they'll be like, wow, I feel like I'm not influenced. Wow, I feel like I'm not drained anymore. And it's like, well, yeah, you had this problem. But some people, that's why I use external pernicious influence, so as not to go, oh my God, I have a demon.
Right, because that can be scary.
Right, yeah, that brings their energy field down.
Right.
So if we use a neutral type of term, we can couch it into, well, it's not helpful for you. Here's where it is in your body and field. Here's what it's chewing on. So here's some things you can do to help that area, to strengthen it. In the meantime, while this thing is detaching from you. So it's much easier on a client, and it's much easier on me, and the higher powers and super friends get to handle most of the work, just provide some insight and guidance to allow it to go.
Wonderful. What are some signs, just so folks listening, might be like, I wonder if I have any EPIs? Like, what are some signs that a human might experience if they're being influenced, by what we are calling external pernicious influences, or shade or shadow aspects or darkness?
Okay, so loss of vitality. So you were perfectly fine going along, and all of a sudden you had a small minor operation, you were put under sedation, and afterwards you never felt the same. You were always weaker, you could never get back to where you thought you wanted to be. It's a really good sign that has occurred. Accidents, traumatic injuries are another, where your body tries to shift out of its aura and move into a safe place for it. Well, in that meantime, while you're getting back into equilibrium, you're off balance, your core is open, and then something is able to crawl in. And the feeling would be like disassociation. You're not quite sure where you're here or there. Different thought patterns. You were perfectly fine and normal and balanced, and suddenly you have cravings or you have thought patterns that were different than they were before. If you feed into them, then you'll help feed that issue that crawled in.
Right.
So then there's pain that you couldn't figure out beforehand what was going on, as they're getting into the more physical aspects of your energetic system and pulling more on your physical body. Leaks, where you can feel nice and strong for a short period of time, and it all leaks out. You're not quite sure how or where that is. So it's pretty much a shift or change occurs after something dramatic, or after you've been exposed to something that shocked you, or created a situation where there's a slight disassociation, where you lost yourself for a moment. And it happens. You can become scared. It happens. You can have an accident. It happens, enough so that you need to be able to get yourself back into balance as soon as possible, so that you don't allow any of those openings to occur. So that give you enough understanding of physical effects, mental effects.
Definitely.
Brain fog is another one, where you're just not quite clear and don't know why, and you're doing everything you can or did before, but you just have a lot of disassociated thoughts and urges and pure brain fog.
Right. Thank you. It's really useful, I think, especially if you're trying to discern, do I have this? Is this something that I need to look at closer? What would you say about the relationship between somebody who has something within them that they might consider like a more shadow aspect that they get to look at within themselves and maybe like learn more about and use to their advantage? So between that and like an external pernicious influence coming in. So let me give an example. So if I'm talking about myself, I could say that one of my shadow aspects is where one thing that I've been working on is like not wanting to be wrong about something. Okay. And that's more, I guess, what we would say is like a personality thing, but like getting defensive and wanting to like shift the energy so that what I'm saying is not false. Mm-hmm. Right. So that is more like of a personality aspect, maybe a shadow kind of aspect that one gets to kind of look at. But can those kind of things be affected by an external pernicious influence and make them kind of more twisted? Or how does one tell the difference between something that's going on within them as a personality thing, as a shadow aspect of themselves, and something that's coming in from outside and influencing them? And do they ever commingle and work together to, create a situation where we need to then shift some energies and make things more into balance or a more positive light? Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense. And so what you need to look at is, if you're looking at your shadow aspects as what other people think of as negative things, like anger, like fear, like ego, if you think of those can be empowering. If you breathe in your heart center and you work with them, you can use them to power you and help you move through things in a compassionate way. if they're using you, in other words, your shadow aspects are driving you and driving your consciousness and your ego, then external pernicious influences can greatly increase and amplify that type of effect. So as those issues begin to develop, they're more easily harnessed because they're lower vibrational feelings, they're lower vibrational aspects of your metaphysical vibration. So they can be augmented by external pernicious influences and influenced to create even more imbalance and create even more issues within your body and within your relationships. And they can cause disharmony that they can then feed on. So working with your shadow aspects can be an empowering thing. I encourage people to look at, how are you reacting to anger? How are you reacting to what people perceive as negative aspects of themselves? And they're not, they're just parts of you. And to come into balance with your parts is to be able to empower you fully at all times. But it needs a bit of discernment, it needs a bit of breath and heart centering to just go, how can I use this to make it better? So a good one for a lot of people is anger. They just go out of control with anger. Well, if you're powered by an external pernicious influence, you'll always be angry and you'll burn up your liver and you're always going to be hot and you always fly off the handle, and it becomes harder and harder to work with. If you try to harness that and go, okay, I'm angry. What triggered me? How can I use that trigger to move it from an immediate blast of pure anger to something I can use to constructively work with? And that takes a little bit of maturity. It takes a little bit of breath and energy control to say, I don't need to do anything right now. I have time. I can take a breath. And in that taking a breath, harness that energy so that you can then use it to move forward in a way that makes more sense. So you're not avoiding the shadow, you're not avoiding those aspects, you're actually using them to give you a better clarity of what's happening, give you look at both sides of a situation, and then give you an avenue that's more balanced to react to. And it's a breath.
That's great. I think we're going to get more into this in the next episode too. So this is a perfect little taste as to, an idea of what one can do when this stuff starts to come up. Is there anything else coming up in your consciousness right now that you want to share on this topic before we wrap up this episode?
I just want to share that people are people and that you don't need to be afraid. That working out of fear is actually drawing your energy levels down and your ability to react intelligently to a point where you no longer have control. So by being aware of how your body reacts in each situation it comes into, by being aware of how your energy reacts to different situations, you're in a position to be in better control. And the overall arcing aspect of this is be nice. Just if you're not being nice, then find out why. If you've got a choice between being not nice and being nice, always be nice, unless you can be Batman.
I've heard you say that over and over for the last several years that we've been working together, and it's been really useful for me in thinking about things when EPIs or a more shadowy aspect comes in. Is just, okay, remember what Jerry said, be nice. And it creates that space in between, what is this and how am I going to react to it?
Yes, that buffer is what people really need to make intelligent decisions based upon all of their knowledge and all of their understanding and their own heart-centered nature. If you don't have the time, if you're feeling pressed, breathe, make the time.
Absolutely. Thank you. Jerry, if people are interested in you and what you do, how can people find out more about you?
Well, I do have a website. It's htwis.com, and it pretty well explains what I do and how I do it and when I do it. I work at a distance. I work on the body. I work within the body, and I work on the land. I work in balancing people's houses in affinity to how they react to their own environment, because some of these issues are not of the shadow demon realm, but of the elemental realm. They live on this planet. They live amongst the elements of this planet. And, if you're trying to sleep with water, working through your house or your bedroom, it's very disconcerting. It's hard to sleep. So then your body starts to react in different ways. So I do geomancy or Vastu Shastra, however you want to call it. I bring your house into balance, your business into balance. But htwis.com.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Looking forward to continuing this topic on the next episode around boundaries and protection and actual things that folks can use to come more into balance around this stuff.
I find that boundaries and protections, especially for younglings, is really helpful to empower them to grow into real human beings who are normal like me and you.
What do you mean by youngling?
Younglings are young humans who aren't quite adults yet, and they don't get to vote. I find that they develop bad habits of just chaos habits of how they learn to live through things, and then they carry that on into the rest of their life. So younglings are like from 6 years old up until teenagers, when hormones set in and things get interesting.
Excellent. All right, and we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode with Jerry Becker about the dark and shadow and external pernicious influences. I think that this is a really important topic, and so much so that we are going to have our next episode be about what to do about all of this stuff. How can you protect yourself about this? So definitely stay tuned for our next episode with Jerry Becker about this topic. For our bonus content today, Jerry and I keep talking about this topic, and we share specific examples from our lives. I talk about my experiences exploring my shadow aspects, and Jerry shares about how we can see this and how we can work with our shadow aspects and make them useful for us. If you want to check this part of the bonus content out, please go to www.patreon.com/letsgetmeta. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Let's Get Metaphysical is entirely listener supported. If you like what we're doing, please consider becoming a patron of the podcast at patreon.com/letsgetmeta. Our intention is to raise the vibration of the planet by sharing, validating, and normalizing spiritual and metaphysical experiences. If you haven't pledged yet, we'd really appreciate your support. It helps keep this show going. Let's Get Metaphysical is a production of the Hana Healing Arts Network. The show's host is Renata Maniaci. The music for this podcast was composed by Rob Treefort of goldenturtlesound.org. Thank you for listening. Stay meta.
Metaphysical. Let's get meta. Metaphysical. Let's get meta. Metaphysical. Let's get meta. Metaphysical.